If you have a passion for British history, remember to show your support by liking the video, subscribing to the British Chronicle, and leaving a comment to share your memories and experiences. A new identity shaped by uniform begins here. Picture yourself at 18 years old, newly finished with school, thinking about employment, further education, or simply enjoying freedom for the first time. Then, one ordinary morning, a letter arrives. It is plain and unremarkable, yet what it contains brings everything to a halt. You have been summoned for national service. Between 1949 and 1963, more than 2 million young men across Britain opened that same envelope. It was not an option or an invitation. It was an order. For many, it marked the first true separation from family life, from familiar comforts, and from the predictable routines of being a civilian. Answering that call carried a weight that could not be fully understood until it happened. If you grew up when resilience was more important than comfort, this story will resonate with you. What follows isn't nostalgia, but a look at a childhood marked by hardship, where strength was learned from a young age and life offered no safety nets. Subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you this kind of content. The process of change began almost immediately, even before formal training started. Within hours of arriving, most recruits were directed to a chair where electric clippers buzzed to life. Hair fell in quiet heaps onto the floor. The act was swift, impersonal, and deeply symbolic. That haircut removed more than hair. It stripped away individuality. It delivered a clear message that you were no longer defined only by yourself, but by the group you now belong to. The uniform followed soon after. At first, it rarely fit properly. Boots felt rigid and unforgiving. Fabric scratched the skin. Buttons shone with an unspoken demand. There was no tailoring and no concern for personal taste, only standard-issue clothing meant for function and conformity. Looking at your reflection, it became clear that clothing was no longer about self-expression, but about discipline and compliance. This shift went far beyond appearance. It reached into emotions and mindset. For many young men who had never lived away from home, even the simplest routines felt overwhelming. Folding socks precisely or making a bed into a flawless square suddenly carried enormous importance. Mistakes were met with the sharp voice of a sergeant, heard by everyone nearby. Yet what is often overlooked is how deeply this enforced sameness reshaped personal identity. In contrast to today's emphasis on individuality, uniformity then was deliberate. National service was not designed to celebrate uniqueness. It aimed to build cohesion. In formation, personal ego became an obstacle. The man beside you mattered just as much as you did. In many respects, the military existed to dismantle the self in order to create unity. Naturally, not every conscript accepted this easily. Some resisted the structure. There were quiet tears behind bunks and letters sent home filled with uncertainty and fear. Yet over time, and often unexpectedly, the strict discipline became a source of reassurance. Life followed a fixed rhythm. You knew exactly when to wake, when to eat, and when to sleep. That rigid schedule, though demanding, created a base upon which resilience could grow. Life in service was not defined solely by drills and shouted commands. In the stillness after lights were turned off, bonds formed. Young men who shared little in common found themselves exchanging stories, sneaking cigarettes, and confiding worries they would never voice during the day. In trying to create soldiers, national service also, unintentionally, created brotherhood. This chapter of history reflects something deeply British. It speaks of quiet endurance, unspoken loyalty, and a restrained sense of pride. For most, it was never about glory, medals, or battlefields. It was about doing what was required, even without fully understanding the reason. Today, it is difficult to imagine placing your life on hold for 2 full years simply because the state demanded it. Yet that is exactly what they did. The experience, whether welcomed or resented, left lasting impressions on habits, friendships, and memory. What followed behind the barracks gates was a daily routine that shaped boys into men through effort, silence, and order. Once recruits passed through the gates of the barracks, civilian existence was left behind entirely. What followed was not merely a new timetable, but a complete restructuring of thought, body, and expectation. While the outside world moved in color and variety, the barracks existed in muted tones of khaki, gray, and control. Mornings did not begin with gentle alarms, but with shouted commands, often before sunrise. Beds were expected to be immaculate, creases sharp and exact. If one man failed, the whole unit paid the price. Responsibility was taught collectively. From a modern perspective, this may seem severe, yet the military understood a timeless truth. Shared pressure forges powerful bonds. Cold drills, forced marches that blistered feet, and chronic exhaustion taught more than physical endurance. They taught reliance on others. The daily routine was relentless. Marching, running, saluting. Rifle practice in rain, lectures on protocol and politics, followed by more saluting. Meals offered only brief respite, served on metal trays and eaten quickly, often in silence. There was no indulgence, and even rest felt earned through hardship. Beneath the rigid structure and raised voices, national service unexpectedly allowed emotional development. Many recruits had never faced expectations beyond school rules. They had not been physically tested or told they were part of something larger than themselves. Now, they were being shaped, not necessarily into warriors, but into dependable adults. The mental strain cannot be ignored. Monotony, distance from home, and constant observation weighed heavily. Some recruits faltered. Some pushed back. Others withdrew into themselves. Yet for most, the structure, however inflexible, provided a stability they had never known. There was dignity in discovering that pressure did not break you. Standing beside others, understanding that strength depended on mutual support, created something lasting. Camaraderie was built not only through shared experience, but through shared endurance. A spare cigarette could create a lifelong friendship. A whispered joke in the dark could release weeks of tension. Small acts, like helping polish boots or fold a blanket, accumulated into something deeper than duty. Heroism is often imagined as dramatic moments of battle. Yet it can also exist in quiet sacrifice, in daily persistence, and in following orders not out of fear, but out of trust in those beside you. For many, national service was less about preparing for war and more about learning reliability. Not attention-grabbing or celebrated, but steady and consistent. In post-war Britain, this may have been the most valuable quality of all. For numerous young men, service extended far beyond the barracks. Orders sent them overseas to places they could barely locate on a map before departure. West Germany, Cyprus, Korea, the Suez Canal zone in Egypt. These destinations were not abstract locations, but unfamiliar stages where anxiety, growth, and history intersected. Deployments were not dramatized. A letter arrived, and soon after, you were on a ship or transport headed somewhere entirely foreign. There were no parades or ceremonies, only paperwork, a uniform change, and the expectation that you would adapt. Arriving in another country meant more than adjusting to climate or language. It meant stepping into complex political realities. The Cold War simmered, colonial tensions remained high, and Britain's global role was under scrutiny. Most recruits were not driven by ideology. Their focus remained on routine, survival, and unit cohesion. Yet service abroad revealed the difference between theoretical soldiering and lived reality. Gone were predictable routines. Barracks could sit beside deserts or tense borders. Danger often came not from combat, but from uncertainty. A misunderstanding, a sudden order, a late-night movement. In these conditions, friendships deepened. Comradeship was forged through shared uncertainty. Long nights brought conversation, reflection, and sometimes quiet tears. Letters from home became priceless. Some waited weeks for replies. Others received none at all. Homesickness was intense, yet rarely spoken. The change brought by overseas service was subtle but permanent. Young men who had never left their counties now navigated checkpoints in divided Germany or patrolled volatile regions in Cyprus. They learned customs, adapted to unfamiliar food, and most importantly, learned calm restraint in situations where a single mistake could escalate rapidly. Unlike cinematic portrayals, most service abroad involved repetition. Waiting, watching, patrolling. It was monotony, not gunfire, that wore them down. Yet there was strength in that consistency, in showing up daily far from anything familiar. Returning home felt strangely disorienting. Friends had moved on, started careers, formed families. Servicemen returned carrying experiences others struggled to comprehend. Reintegration became its own challenge. There were no support systems or formal transitions. One day you were a soldier, the next you were expected to resume civilian life seamlessly. Habits remained. Beds were made with precision. Posture stayed rigid. Words were measured. Some employers valued discipline. Others misunderstood it. Coming home was not just a physical return, but a psychological adjustment. Letting go of an identity shaped by duty proved difficult. Yet within that struggle grew resilience, perspective, and responsibility. These men had endured extremes and carried lessons no classroom could provide. Slowly, they rebuilt lives. Some returned to education. Others learned trades, raised families, or entered business. The structure that once confined them became an internal foundation. By the 1970s and 80s, national service had faded into memory, yet its influence persisted. It remained visible in workplaces, classrooms, and homes. Discipline, punctuality, teamwork, and emotional restraint became embedded into civilian life. Military service also created shared experience across class and region. Rich or poor, north or south, millions had marched, queued, and endured together. The legacy was complex. For some, emotional reserve became a barrier. Stoicism came at the cost of vulnerability. Yet endurance was passed down quietly through example. Even those who never served felt its presence in stories told by fathers and grandfathers, in childhood games, and in cultural memory. National service did not end with fanfare. Uniforms were folded, lockers emptied, and life moved on. Over time, it became reframed through books, films, and humor. Comedy softened its edges. Nostalgia romanticized it. Yet beneath that selective memory lay deferred dreams and unspoken burdens. What made national service powerful was the interruption. Life paused. Young men learned to exist within a system they did not choose. That experience left echoes. In posture, in habits, in attitudes toward duty and belonging. National service is remembered not because it was flawless, but because it mattered. It remains a quiet pillar of Britain's post-war story, carried in memory, worn into behavior, and whispered long after the final lights went out. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who has experienced it, or with someone who hasn't. Understanding the origins of that resilience helps connect generations shaped by very different worlds. Subscribe so we can continue bringing you more content like this. See you next time.